Okay. So that's going. Now I'll maximize again. I didn't know I was still zoomed in here, but I guess I am. I'm going to bring up the Management Studio. I already have mine up, but if you don't, bring it up. You have, so SQL Server Management Studio. We're almost done with SQL Server 2, and then we'll be going to MySQL. There are some things about MySQL I think is a much less good database, but some of the tools around it are actually kind of nicer. Even though Microsoft puts lots of money into their tools. Everybody kind of in, you're going in. I'll give you a moment. Yeah, password. You're still updating, 94. Do you have the machine and everything on there?
Yeah, there's some more information.
Right, but do you have the,
There we go.
is that the one you installed?
Yeah.
We're not gonna do
I saw you moving, that's what I was wondering.
Well, yeah, this I'm sure I didn't have it, so.
Yeah. It would be nice if this would move, if this virtual machine would move with your profile, then you could log in anywhere, but it doesn't. Partially because our network pipes are not big enough. It would take forever to copy these things. Okay. Everyone sort of in? You're loading. You got it in both places. Okay. So what I want to do first is just going to go over again entering data, one of the ways to do it, and then we're going to do some SQL. Because if we look at the assignment, so let's bring up the assignment. I have it here somewhere. I also have GitHub up. Let's see. So this is the last before the quiz. SQL Server sample data and tests. So the first part, which will take some time, and I want to go over that a little bit, is entering 5 or 10 rows of sample data, right? And I'm going to kind of go over that process again, because there are a few things that can be gotchas in there. And then I'm going, these are SQL queries. And I'm going to show you how to do some of the SQL. Because the way we're going to kind of test it is to run these SQL queries. Okay, so we're all there so far. So quiet in here. You guys need to make some noise. All right. So I'm going to do, I have a Vincent's vinyl here that I made sometime. I'm not sure it matches ours exactly, but I'm only interested in entering data anyway. Oops, that's a diagram, which is okay, but I want the tables. So this is one way to enter data I'm going to show you, and then I'll show you a couple of others. So if I right-click on album, I can do edit top 200 rows, right? And that'll give you the ability not only to add existing ones, but to add new ones. So it'll pop up here, and I have some in here. Partially because I did it this morning too, and there were a couple from before. But if you have nothing, it'd be just an empty, just the columns and an empty thing with a null. It'll look like this at the top.
Classic albums.
What?
The classic albums.
Yeah. So did you guys get that? What I did to get this is I just right-click, edit top 200 rows. So hit a plus. You have your databases. Hit the plus to the databases. And then Vincent's final.
Right.
And then you hit the plus by the tables. You don't have tables. Did you not save it?
Thought I did. You did.
Look at that. No.
So, should have, at least not yet. I'm just gonna show us how to put it there, get your stuff.
When you saved it, I was pretty sure.
Well, I'll show it, yes,
That's weird. I can keep in mind, but I'm not sure what he's saying. You know how to, let me show you how to do, while we're doing this. If you want to move a database, I was going to show this anyway. This is sort of off before we do the data entry. I'm going to right click bakery. I'm not going to use Vincent's right now because it's in use. One of the things about doing this is it can't be in use. I'm going to do bakery, and I'm going to do tasks. You don't have to do this, but if you want to move these database files, you have to detach them. They are hooked to the server, to SQL Server, and as long as SQL Server is running and hooked to them, it won't allow you to copy them. It won't allow you to move them. So I'm going to do detach. It gives you this. You just ignore this, because if you do drop or update up there, you're going to mess the database up. Just ignore that and just do OK. Notice the bakery is gone. It's not attached anymore. The files are still there.
Where'd it go?
So it's just no longer attached to the server. But if you go to File Explorer, go to this PC, local disk C, program files, Microsoft SQL Server, SQL Server Express, MSQL, data, and continue. You will see that the bakery is still there. So you can copy them now. Yeah, it won't allow you, like if you were to try to do the Vincent Vinyl right now, it wouldn't let me copy. Yeah, you did this. So when you do this, now you can copy and send and do whatever you want with those. So if I go, can I get to the desktop? I'd have to, so I can paste. And then you can do whatever you want with them. Then when you come back, so let's bring this back up. To bring them back, you click on databases, right click, attach, add, find the bakery or whatever file you want, do OK again, and it will be back. So you have to detach it and attach it. Does that make sense? You can kind of get that already.
Yeah, I'm just gonna try to get her.
Yeah, if you can't.
Is it bakery MDF?
Yeah, so MDF is the database file, and then there's an LDF, which is the log one. The log one will show up when you say attach. That's just if you want to move them around. In real life, database files are usually way too big to move around. All right, are we ready for data entry? I'll give you a second to get that. Have you got it?
Should I then delete the one I have named as on?
You might. It's weird. So if you
When
write,
I thought when I opened the create a new table, it would prompt you to save.
well, it doesn't prompt you to save as often as you would think, but it usually prompts you to save before you exit.
I should have.
Yeah, go ahead. Anyone else with this? Let's see if we can get. Email should be, they're not that huge. let me know if it doesn't get there, and I'll help too. I'm going to do some data entry though, real quick, and then I'll help you catch up if you need. I really don't know why that wasn't saved. That's weird. With this, I have this auto numbered, and the way I can tell that it's auto numbered is it's kind of browned out, and it won't allow me to enter any numbers there. But if you didn't auto number it, you would have to enter the numbers here. So what's another album?
Do we type these in?
What?
Do we have to type these?
You have to type.
Okay.
You don't have to type these albums in. You can do whatever albums you want. I don't care.
Can't think of any, so.
This is just going at the top 200 rows?
Yeah, so this is just top 200 rows. I just want to show you some of what's involved in entering data. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it.
I have a question.
Yeah,
Did you click on the little plus sign, or do you actually click on the table?
click on the table. So I'll close this and do it again. So what you want to do, I did album. I did right click, and I did edit top 200 rows. Couple of things. When you do this, you always have to enter data on the primary key size first. And I'll show you kind of what that means. This is a primary key size. There's no foreign keys in this. So I need a new album. How is it that I have thousands of albums and I can't think of a title?
Paranoid Android.
Is that an actual album?
Yeah, Radiohead.
Oh, Radiohead. Okay.
What's that?
Any idea on the year?
Probably like
Make it up.
1999 or so.
Okay. Have no idea what the label is. I have no
Steve
idea.
Little.
Why?
Steve Little.
Or it's probably independent, actually.
But it still probably have
Oh,
a
no,
name.
it was actually probably back then, maybe it was Columbia.
That's good. So, a couple of things I wanted to tell you. This looks scary, right?
Yeah.
We've got 2 exclamation marks. All that means is it's not saved. As soon as you click into the next row, it is saved. Right? It saves it row by row. As soon as you exit a row, it writes it to disk. They do that so that you don't like enter 1,000 records and suddenly have a crash and lose all 1,000 records. Right? So it writes row by row as you go. Now I'm going to go to artist. And again, I'm going to do the same thing, edit top 200 rows. I have a couple here. We could do Radiohead. And then we could do like Bob Dylan was on there too, I noticed. All right, so you can enter your albums there. To associate them, there's artist album. So let me just do edit top 200 rows. You have to just enter the numbers. It doesn't auto-populate anything. So I have to figure out, all right, so if I look at album 1 is Blonde on Blonde. So an artist album, I would say this is album 1. Dylan is not saved yet, 5. So Dylan would be 5. Oops. And you can kind of see how painful that's going to be. So Bob Dylan in artist is 5. All right. And the album that Dylan is Blonde on Blonde, which is album number 1. So in artist album, it's album ID 1, artist ID 5.
Oh, no. Oh, that's
And there's no magic way to do this, right? It's just going back and forth. And if I get one that's not there, so let's look at artist. 5 is the last artist. If I were to put a 6 here, and a 3, even though 3 is a real album, it won't save, right? And the reason that it won't save is that there is no artist ID 6 in the artist table. One of the things about a foreign key is that it has to exist in the primary key table. That's part of what a foreign key constraint is. So because there's no artist 6, it won't write this row. And the only way out is to press escape a few couple of times. Now, a couple of other things.
So I got a question.
Yeah.
So we foolishly had album title and album name, and those are redundant. How do you get rid of one?
So if you want to make a change, go to, say, album, right click, and instead of select top 200 rows, go to design. Select the second one, and you're back in the designer. And you can drop or add.
Okay.
And it's fine if you go out there and switch in the tabs.
It is. Now this won't, the change won't take effect until you save this. You can have them across here. In fact, for the data, you're probably going to need to do that because it's going to be a pain, you know, figuring out what key goes with what data in another one, right? So, and if I were to go to inventory, I'm going to open up inventory. So I'm going to do edit top 200 rows. The trouble is I probably can't enter anything into inventory.
You have to,
Because purchase ID is a foreign key.
you have to make sure.
You have to enter purchase first. Condition ID is a foreign key. I have to enter the conditions first. I can't enter inventory until I have the purchase ID, the condition ID. This is the only field I can enter, but it won't let you do it until you have those others also.
Oh, did you do it?
So a couple of things about the data entry, and then we're going to go to the SQL. Did you get set up?
I can't find the file. I don't know.
So,
You can't open it. From the
oh, it's okay. So taking it.
So did you
Right,
put it
so
on
go
the
to add, I
add?
can't find that.
You
Oh, type in something.
need to move it over here and then move it to the bank.
Yeah, and then continue. And then paste it over both of them. Do you have only one of them? There should be
Well, see,
two.
it's like, this still has album name and album
There should be.
title. It should.
Yeah, but
Go ahead, is this the MDF file?
what's the,
I think we can do it.
is your Vincent's final design? Yeah, that's what happened there.
There should be an LDF.
Was that updated? Yeah, album's updated.
Mm-hmm.
Close, oh, I think.
Oh, the log?
Yeah. But I can, you should have, because it's still attached, you attached it. But I think we can do this. So next is, put it in.
Back up into the one or did they do it?
Alright, so,
Go to the second one. Type the second one.
Oh,
No, just go anywhere in the second. Click the mouse.
It doesn't
No,
matter.
not on the first, no, not on the first one.
Uh-huh.
On any mobile.
where, here?
Yeah. Because we can say when it saved it.
Yeah, but I think it's following the saving.
you could do that, or I think I can do
Use.
SQL Server, SQL
Oh, wait. Are the album name and label, are they wrong?
attach database.
Yeah, it should be.
That log file.
It should work.
I don't know what you do, man.
I don't know. Yes.
Can I get a second?
Um,
When I do the second one.
Did you just have a 1 here to begin with?
I didn't type it in. If it's browned out,
Mm-hmm.
it said it was like auto number.
Yeah, it should. So it
There
should.
was that setting for auto number.
I have it set. You got any specification? Yes. Driver's seat is one.
I don't know.
Their data should be exactly the same until this.
Because all I did was I did this, and I closed all these little, every one of these, I just closed them. And it didn't compliant. Well, I had more little tabs up. After I made that change.
Some of them have like data and no ones.
Like a bunch of undos.
I wish. So let's do, yeah, you can undo. Well, you can undo once. That's good.
They need to see it on the version also.
Yeah, seriously. Huh. Well, because I think it's because like I deleted those columns while this thing was still up. You did the same thing, didn't you? Thought you did.
I think you did.
Well, I say, I did the thing where I deleted it.
Yeah.
Sorry.
He broke it.
I don't know what, like, 'cause I think it's because I deleted one of the columns while I was actually still editing this.
So you might have to
Just giving me this, no matter what I do.
You can't get out of it.
do escape.
Oh. That's cool.
Okay, good.
Close, so is that bottom?
All right, so you're gonna find, if you do get stuck, you can escape your way out of it. The thing I was gonna say about this one, this is inventory. I can't enter here until I do the purchases, right? Because purchase ID is a foreign key. I can't enter until I do conditions, because conditions are a foreign key.
Okay.
You always have to do the primary key side first. All right.
Does it show our primary keys and stuff?
What?
Does it show our primary keys or you just have to remember them?
So if I wanted to do, so like when I do artist album here, I had to look them up, right? Now in the real world, the way this would be done is that you'd have a software front end that would pull the keys and then insert them for you, right? That's would be done in the code underneath. But for this way we're entering data, it's going to be very tedious. One reason I'm only having you enter 5 or 6 records in each table. So that's the first part of this. The second part I want to talk about is SQL.
So wait, that particular page, you typed those in specifically?
I just typed them in.
You had to
So
look them up and know what.
I had to look them up. So let's say album. Oh, I don't want the design for album. I want album. There's album. So let's say, I don't think I have most of these down. Did I too? Let's look what I have in artist. I did add Radiohead. So Radiohead is 4. And then the album is 7. So in artist album, I would have to say the artist ID is 7 and the artist album ID is 4. Wrong way. 4, 7, the other way. There we go. You have to look them up and you have to type them in. It's a pain. But I want to show you the next part too. This is going to take a while just because of the painfulness of having to look things up. There's no way, it doesn't auto-populate anything. No database does, actually. Access sort of cheats and makes it think it's doing that, but it doesn't. Yeah.
Seems like my like IDs are starting at 5.
That's fine.
it should not start at 1 or.
So if you delete one,
Uh-huh.
it never comes back. If
Oh,
you're
wow.
using auto numbers, if you delete a number, it never comes back. And it doesn't matter. It drives people nuts that they're not necessarily in sequence, but it doesn't matter as long as every row has a unique.
Oh.
And they do it on purpose because it gets rid of any ghost of any kind of relationship that might have been in there.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So anytime you make an error or delete something, it never comes back. if you're using auto numbers. If you're writing in your own numbers, and that isn't the case. Okay, so I'm going to do SQL. Are you guys ready? Did you get set up then?
I missed all that though.
Yeah, it's just adding. So like if you right click an album, you can just enter. But you still have to do genres.
Okay.
The genres are foreign key there.
Okay.
All right, so let's do some SQL. Yeah.
What have we added other than artist album and?
Well, so I wouldn't follow. Just enter your own data. I mean, my data. This is just to show you how to enter data. You don't need to enter the data I have. But I did artist, album, and artist album. And then the only other thing I did is I opened up inventory to show you you'd have to do other stuff first. You can make up your own albums. They could be real albums or you can make them up. I don't care. You could say album 1, album 2, album 3 if you really want to.
And how do you save it once you click?
It is safe.
So like mine just says no row.
There's nothing, so you don't have an auto number, so you have to put a number in there.
Just I have to.
Yeah. If you didn't auto number it, you have to put your own numbers in. Well, in the artist ID, you have to anyway. But in, say, artist, if they're not brown or gray, then you're going to have to put your own number in. And that's fine, because I'm only going to ask you to enter like 5 or 6 rows per thing. Okay, are we sorted? Ready to move on? I'm going to give you time to do that. That's going to take a little while. All right, but I want to show you some SQL too, because that's the second part of the assignment. Once you've got it in, I want you to do a little bit of testing of it with SQL, just to get the feel for a little bit of a feel for SQL. So are we ready? I'm going to do a new query. I'm not going to query Vincent's, because the queries that I would do would be the direct answers to your problem. So I'm going to actually use Community Assist. How many of you guys have Community Assist? You don't have to if you just want to watch, but I'll show you where to get it. So if you go to github.com/spconf on the website, inside the, probably easier if you do it inside the virtual machine. Just use the web browser. Yeah. So github.com, and my account is spconf. So everybody there? github.com spconf. This is the database I'm going to use just for the sample queries. So in here, there's a thing. So github.com/spconf. There's a thing called database schema. And the one I'm going to use is Community Assist SQL, not the Community Assist 2017. Community Assist 2017 is essentially empty. Community Assist SQL has a few hundred records. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click it. So Community Assist SQL, Community_Assist SQL. What? No, it's under database schema. And then just go down until you see Community Assist SQL. Then if you click it, what I would do here is I would do a quick raw. Raw takes all the formatting out of it. And then I'm going to just Control-A, Control-C. And I'm going to paste it in, if you don't have this open already, a new query. Paste it. My zoom is really big, so it's all gigantic. You don't have to scroll to the top. But you can if you want. What you want to do then is just execute.
Looks so
Oh, yeah.
weird.
Yours is fine.
We have to be on this.
Mine looks weird because it's gigantic.
Oh.
So I'm going to hit the little green triangle for execute. If you go to the bottom, when you see these, that means it's worked. That's for each row that it's right.
Does it matter where we're starting when we do the new query? Or?
It does not. Yes, if it did all of that, it did. All right, so you may have to, over here on databases, refresh, and then you should see Community Assist. And it has tables.
We just added all that with this.
You just added all that with that script. Yes. Yeah.
At this wasn't connected to the internet, so I got last time connected
Oh,
to my
that's
phone.
fine.
So I got it here.
And you're in,
This is yours, I think.
yeah, so go to database schema. And then you want the Community Assist SQL. And then just turn it to raw. That's what I'm going to do. And then control, and I just copy it. Select it all.
And then so it's copied.
Yeah, and then that's a query, so just paste.
So hold on, let me make sure. I think yeah, this is a query, right? So just
Yeah,
paste
so
it all
just
in.
paste, yeah. And then just execute.
Never thought I'd say that.
And then refresh.
So it is there, so if you refresh on the database level, so go up a layer higher. Where it says databases, you right click there and do refresh.
For me, it's always.
And you don't have to save this file, you can if you want. It has a lot of SQL in it that you might be curious about. Most of this is inserting right here, but there's other stuff in it. For the most part, though, once it's run, you can go just close it. I'm not going to save it. And I will make a new query. So I'm not going to show you everything about SQL, but I'm going to show you what you need to do to the assignment, basically.
So what if we just copy that? What is that?
It's a database. It's a script for the database and inserts for the database. So
So is that MySQL or?
it's just SQL. Yes. It was all written in, it was all just SQL. The thing about relational databases is literally everything that they do is in SQL. Even the GUI is writing SQL underneath.
Did you create that entire script, or is that just like a?
So originally I created it myself, but actually over the years I've gotten lazy and I just do tasks, generate scripts, wherever that is there. So you can script any database.
So just new query.
Yeah, so I'm just doing a new query right now.
Off of Community Assist.
That would probably be good off of Community Assist. Mine says master up there, so I'm going to say use Community Assist.
Does that just mean you've highlighted Community Assist?
What?
Does that just mean you've highlighted?
Well, so this up here tells you what your database context is. Right now it's master.
What should it be?
Community Assist. So if I execute this, I'm now in Community Assist. Use Community Assist just says what database you're going to use, right? So I'm going to leave it gigantic, I guess, but I'm going to do a basic. How many of you have done some SQL? Anybody? You've done some. You probably won't learn much today, because it's going to be pretty basic. But you're the only one that's ever done SQL?
Just a tad.
Just a tad.
Just adding some PHP stuff to
Yeah, I mean, typically if you're a web developer or something, you're going to end up doing some SQL. May not be super complex stuff, but I'm going to do a real quick select star from person. So this is a real basic SQL statement. The select means we just want to return, right? Select is whatever you use every time you want to return data. The asterisk in this case is a wildcard for columns. It means return all the columns. So if you don't want to select among the columns, you can just use the asterisk. Couple of things, if you're in a production environment like PHP or something where you're writing, you shouldn't use the asterisk. You should specify your columns, just so you always know what you're getting back. From is a keyword, and it separates, select these columns from this table. So after the from, it was always the name of a table. So notice we've got person down here. And that's the table we're trying to get stuff from. Yeah.
Is the case important for the?
It is not.
Words? Okay.
I've
seen them all capitalized before. So.
Typically, the stylistic for it, which I'm too lazy to do, is to capitalize the keywords. But SQL Server is, not only SQL Server, SQL on any platform is case insensitive, which is fun. Yeah. So it's never case sensitive. One of the only languages I know that isn't case sensitive. And I'm a lazy typist. But when I do this for text, when I'm doing it like for examples, I do capitalize them all because that's the convention.
Yeah.
The other thing that it will varies depending on your platform is that technically they should all end with a semicolon, but in the SQL Server environment, it ignores the semicolons. So you don't have to ever type them, and again, I'm lazy. But it can develop bad habits because when you go to MySQL or to Oracle or something, the semicolons are suddenly required, and then it gets, you have to remember to put them there. You can highlight. I'm highlighting this one. You can execute just one at a time, but it only will execute the one you've selected. If you don't select it, it'll run everything. So again, you can hit this, or you can do F5, and down here it'll give you the data, right? So that's everything from the person table, and it's all the data in the person table. So that's the simplest, one of the simplest SQL queries. SQL, I think, did we talk about it being like a 4th generation language? Even if we did. So one of the nice things about SQL is, so 1st generation is machine language, zeros, ones, switches on and off. 2nd generation is assembler, which is basically just a verbal guide to machine language. 3rd generation is pretty much everything else, Python, C, C#, Java, all of that. They're all procedural. You always have to tell things how to do something, right? How abstract that is depends on the language, but you basically have to tell it to loop and to go get this stuff. SQL is not, you don't have to say what the procedure is. You don't have to say how to go get the data. You just say, I want to see this data, right? So you just say what you want to do, not how. Underneath, there is C++ code that's saying, go find the data file, loop through the data file, store it in some kind of set or list, and then loop through it again to display it. But we don't have to say that. We just say select. Okay, does that make sense? I'm going to do another variation of the select here. I'm going to say select person last name, person first name.
I noticed yours stayed, mine didn't. Why?
What?
Like I noticed yours are staying as you're saying. You need to select from person, select person last name. Mine, as I type, mine disappeared.
I don't know why that would be interesting. Did you have it highlighted?
I unhighlighted it to do the next.
Yeah, so it should have stayed there. Anyway, I'm going to do person email. I will post this, of course. And then from person. So the difference between this one and, so that looks okay. What, there it goes. The difference between this one and the last one is I'm saying what columns I want to see in the order I want to see them, right? So you can always list the columns you want to see. So this time I'm not going to look at everything in the table. I'm only going to see their last name, first name. Does that make sense? So you can always select, and these don't have to be in the same order as they are in the table. They can be in whatever order you want to see. So if I wanted to do first name, last name instead of last name, first name, like that. And then I'm going to show one last thing for just simple selects, and then we'll do a couple of other additions. Does this make sense? These aren't hard, but they take practice. The last thing I'm going to do, I actually will copy this same thing here. Again, lazy, so why type it? Just real quickly, down here we have Anderson, Zimmerman, Mann, Camel, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to sort them. So first I will order by person last name. And what that will do, I'm just selecting that part, execute, is there'll be an alphabetical order by last name, right?
Person last name.
Yeah, so I'll go back up there and show that. But it just order by person last name. If it was a numeric field, it would order, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc. If it was a date field, it would order by the dates.
Did you highlight them all and work through that?
No, I only highlighted these 3 lines.
Okay.
If I don't highlight a line, then you end up with something like this, which can be useful sometimes, but it runs all the queries. Like with the script that created the database, we didn't highlight any of it, we just ran the database. I'm going to copy this again because I'm going to show you one other variation of it. Instead of doing it ascending, we'll do it as descending, D-E-S-C. And now the names are alphabet in reverse order. D-E-S-C. If you want to run just one of them, it will. If you select one, it'll only run the selected one. Questions so far? Everything we've done so far returns all the rows. Doesn't necessarily return all the columns, but it returns all the rows. So I'm going to add a where clause. Notice the comment. This is weird because nobody else comments like that, but dash dash. So with the where clause, we're going to select among the rows. So I'm just looking at my list here. Let's say we wanted to know how many Smiths we had. So I'm going to do this again. I'm just doing this for speed, and it's a pain to type it over and over again. I'm going to add something here. Notice that the white space doesn't matter either. I mean, you can break these however you want the lines. Where is another keyword, and where lets you set up a criteria. So I'm going to say like where person last name equals Smith. All right. So we're going to look only for those people in the person list whose last name is Smith. A couple of things about it. Single quotes, double quotes will not work. You'll get an error if you use double quotes. Find your way. So we have two Smiths. Okay, so this is searching for what they call a literal string or literal characters. Question on that yet? I know I'm going kind of fast, so if you need me to slow down, let me know. Yeah.
When will the quiz be?
You can do it whenever, but it sort of assumes that you've finished the section, and then
Gotcha.
I think it's multiple choice, multiple tries.
Okay.
I'm going to copy this. I'm going to make one other little variation to it. So let's say you wanted to see only Jerry Smith. You could add and person first name. I'm going to break that line just so it's on screen. Equals Jerry, and I need to get rid of that space because that's a literal character. And it will bring up just that one person, right? So you can use an and in here too. You can also use or not. I'm going to do just a couple more of these, and then we'll do some others. I'll show you how to do dates and numbers. And nulls. Does among have a U in it? Does? I was trying to decide if that was a British spelling for a moment.
Does it?
No.
It doesn't. I think it does in British.
Probably.
Just like color has an O-U-R. I read a lot of British stuff, and it messes me up sometimes. Is it working? Okay.
Kinda, I don't have that. These are working. The relational diagram?
Well, I think it's more like, you could always say yourself, kind of like a third.
Yeah, just go up to the
web interface version.
right there. Just right
In the background, it might do these.
Maybe it just like that. Yes.
People,
Okay.
person.
Actually, it says you aren't doing it. So let's see.
Person's name, it would be one of these queries.
So, oh, that's been fun. Oh, yeah, that's because it was made on your machine, so maybe. So let's do. Okay, so. Oh, it's done. This is fine.
Nice.
Yeah. All right, so I'm going to do, just real quick, I'm going to show you person address. And we'll do a couple queries there and just a couple more things. So person address in this has, like a person, it has the null if they don't have an apartment, has their apartment, has the Seattle, Washington, etc. So I just wanted to show you a couple of things that you could do, like we've done Smith and Jerry. Let's just say we wanted to see everybody that is not in Seattle. So I'm going to say where person address city. And actually I have to say, I have to do, I have from. So where not person address city equals Seattle. I just wanted to show you a not. And when I run that, it will show me everybody that isn't in Seattle. So I wanted to show you the not. And weirdly, the not has to precede the column here, right? As opposed to saying we're person not equal, instead of putting the not there. So that, and if I wanted to, the other thing is nulls, right? We have all those nulls. So if I run this again, what if you wanted to look for all the people that had an apartment? How do you do with a null?
We're not knowing.
So, well, you could do, what happens if I do select star from person address?
Use not for null too.
You can use a not, but where, if I were to say not person address apartment equal null, what do you think I would get?
Well, it's not null, therefore it's only the ones that have the suites.
We actually get nothing.
A null isn't a string, so it wouldn't work that way, I guess.
The thing about a null is that a null is not a string. It is not a number. You can't, it's an unknown value. You can't use any kind of comparative operator. You can't use equal. You can't use greater than. You can't use less than. So they have a special operator for null.
No.
Is, yes. So if you say is null, and this is not is null, then it gives you all the ones that have apartments. Right. The thing is with nulls, you can't use equal. You have to use is. And if you wanted to see all the ones that were not and did not have apartments, you just take the not out.
What's the difference between with the space or not? Without the space, it turns pink.
What?
What does that mean?
Space where?
Well, when I'm typing it, is there something else called is null as opposed to is and then null?
I think.
When I'm typing it in, the colors change.
Yeah, I think is null is a function.
Oh.
I think is null is a function where you can determine whether a column is null or not. I think it's usually used with an if. We're not going to go there. But I think you could say if is null, then do this. All right, so if you bring these together, yeah, that's a function. But this is determining whether or not it's null, returning a value based on whether it's null or not. I'm going to do just a couple more wheres, just so you can see some examples. So I'm going to go for donation. I'm just going to do select asterisk from donation, where donation amount. Let's say is greater than 1,000. I'm just randomly doing that. Okay, and I can break that. So there's a couple of things to notice about that. One is that you don't have to quote numbers. Right? If it's a numeric type, you don't have to quote it. So, and you can do greater than, less than, equal to, greater than, equal to, etc. Less than or equal to. Notice nothing here is 1,000. I don't know if there are any 1,000 donations. Let's look. I could just put a greater than equal to. Are there any 1,000? There still aren't any 1,000. There's one. There's one for 1,000. Okay. And then the last thing I want to do is show you a couple of things with dates. And then we'll do a join. So I'm from donation. I'm just going to say, what happens if I do? So let's do this first, just so we can see all the donations again. Let's say I want to see where donation date equals, and notice we've got, so I'm going to do 2015-8-9. And you can do this, you can actually do this as 8, 9, 2015. Except you have to type right. But what will I get when I do this?
I think you'll get them all. They're in the same day.
No, you get nothing. Because it's looking for a literal match to that date. And why is there no literal match?
It's not the right format.
No, it's not the format that's doing it.
Is it the order, like the 2015 come first?
It's the time.
Huh.
So because this is a date time field, if you don't enter, it's perfectly happy if you do this, but if you don't enter a time, then it assumes 00:00:00, which is midnight. So unless all of these are after midnight, so they don't match. So there's a couple of ways you could do this. One, you could put in a time. Notice these are all the same time. That's just bad planning on my part. I put a get date in there when I did the inserts, and I inserted it in a bulk, so they're all pretty much the same time.
Do you have to put in the exact time?
No, you could, but there's another way to do this. I'm going to change this again. This actually works really well. So I'm going to say, instead of equal, I'm going to say between. And then I will say, and 8, 10, 20, 15. And what that'll do is basically it's going to return everything from midnight on the 9th to midnight on the 10th. So right as the date changes. And when I run that, let me break this so it fits the screen a little better. Then it returns all the ones between those dates, which is a fair number because of the way I entered the data. I've been redoing this in order to correct some of these things. So between, and you don't have to use it just with dates. You can use between with other values too. Or you could enter the other equivalent to this is greater than, so you could say we're donation date greater than 8/9/2015 and donation date less than. It would have about the same effect. Notice the dates are quoted. And although I entered the date this way, this works perfectly fine in SQL Server. When we get to MySQL, it's going to want the date like this. Year, month, day. All right, so that's enough for the wheres. So I'm going to do a simple join. Questions, though? I will post this. I don't expect this all to sink in, by the way. What I want, I'll post this. You'll have the example, and then when you try it, I assume I'll be helping people. It takes a while to sink in. So those are different where clauses for searching for things. One of the things that happens when you build a database, as you've gone through, is that you split things out, right? So I'm going to show, I'm going to real quickly just do a select star from grant request. So in grant request,
Why does the sidebar turn yellow, green to yellow?
I think these are things that haven't been saved.
Oh.
So if I were to save right now, which I usually don't do, but I'll just call it SQL query for the 3. Now they're green. See?
Oh.
The green means that it's been saved up to this part. But when I go on, it will be yellow again. All right. So I wanted to show, this is grant request in this. There's a couple of foreign keys. There's a person key here, right? So what person is making the request, we don't know unless you go look up the number. And there's a grant type key, which has a lookup table of what the grant types are. And again, unless you've memorized them, it's hard to say what that is, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you, we're going to join in first the person table, and then we'll join in the grant type table. This is the most complicated thing that I'll probably show you, right? And then I'll show you some insert, update, and delete. But I'll show you how you can bring the information back together so you don't have to go look up the person key if you don't want. So these are going to be inner joins. There are other kinds of joins. We're not going to cover them. There's outer joins, cross joins, full joins. There's lots of different kinds of joins. But inner joins are the ones you would use most commonly. So I'm going to select, this time I'm going to choose some fields names. So I need to see, let's do the grant request key. Grant request date. I'm going to break the line here. I'm going to get person last name. Person first name. I don't know why I always do first name, last name, but I'm going to break again just for readability. I'm going to do grant type name. I'm going to leave the explanation out, but I will do grant type request amount. Now, the first thing that you might notice is I just listed all the fields. Actually, let's do grant type key first, because I said I was going to do it in 2 steps. So we'll just do grant type key for right now. You just list all of the fields that you want to see in the order that you want to see them, regardless of what table they're in. Right? So the person first name, person last name, those are both in person table. Everything else is in grant request table. So I'm going to say from, and I can do whatever table I want to do first. Let's do grant request. Okay. And then I'm going to say, oh, this needs a comma. That would throw an error. I was wondering why this wasn't red underlined. All right, and I'm going to say inner join person. And then I have to say how these two tables relate. So I'm going to say on, and it doesn't matter which one comes first, person.person key equals grant request dot person key. So we're telling how those two tables relate. So all the fields, no matter what table they're from, choose one of the tables as your starting point, and then tell how those tables join. So if I run this, you'll see down here we have fields, the grant request key, the grant request date, person last name, person first name, grant type key, and grant request amount. Now we're going to change the grant type key in a moment to show the grant type as well. But we're joining information from two tables. We're starting to bring it back together for readability. Right? How did that go? Did it work for you guys? There's lots of opportunity for typos in this.
I think should go back up just a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah. Could you back up even more?
Where to where? Did you need above? And as I said, I will post this on the blog as soon as we're done. So it'll be there.
So, yeah, it connected to what?
It connected person and grant request.
So instead of the first name not showing up, now it's showing up.
Yes. All that was there before was the person key. Right?
So this one,
If you run that one, it's just the keys, person key. Now we're getting the names of the person. So the key is what relates it. We're using the key down here, the person key, to return the person name, so we can look at the name instead of just the key.
Did you run it from 41 on?
41 off.
I'm gonna go. I think it's there.
okay, so
Oh, that ran two. That didn't run two. Oh, you have two select. Oh, and then, yeah. So it would start with the next select.
This one.
Yeah. So do you want to bring in the, this one has, are you guys ready with it now?
So what if you just, because you listed all those fields, which was in the previous one,
Right.
request, but you have to list every one of these same fields for it to work in this fashion?
What do you mean?
Well, because you said with just the grant request, it showed us 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, about six fields. But here, when you wanted to join them, you had to list every single one just to get the extra name to show.
Well, so it's possible, although I'm not sure.
Well, I mean, if you did grant request and just interjoin person, would that work? Or
You have to list something. You always have to have something in the select.
well, okay.
So if I do, you wouldn't want to do this necessarily. So I'm going to do that, and then I'm just going to do these, add to that. If you do this, you're going to get something that's kind of a mess. But it'll work. So it gives you everything from grant request and everything from person all together. Yeah, it makes it, it's just sort of a mess.
So if you drill down, you got to be more specific.
Yes, if you drill down, you get more what you want to look at, right? This just brings everything back from both tables, and it's more than you want to see generally. I'm going to, let's add in, so I'm going to run this one again, the top one. When we do this, we still don't know what the grant type is. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to run it again and add that in. So what that'll mean is it'll be a 3-table join. So I'm going to copy the 2-table join. I'm going to change grant type key to grant type name. So we're going to bring in the grant type name. But in order to do that, I have to do another join.
So wait, you're doing this a second time, but just changing something?
I changed the grant type key to grant type name. And then I'm adding inner join grant type. And I have to say how it relates on grant type. Dot grant type key equals grant request dot grant type key. Right? So I'm telling how those two tables relate.
I have a question.
Yeah.
And they said, so it really doesn't matter if we type it in capitals or not.
No, it doesn't. Yeah. It's not case sensitive. Even the data stuff isn't case sensitive. That being said, there are some options in the database. If you remember how we looked at the properties, you could make it case sensitive. You can't make the SQL commands case sensitive, but you can make the column names and data in a case sensitive if you want. But by default, it is not. And that's the default as far as I've ever encountered in any database. The default is not case sensitive. But you can make it case sensitive if you want.
And that would be good for first names and last names.
It could be, yeah. But I mean, I could type in Anderson and Deloitte. That doesn't force you to enter them in the proper case. It just makes it that you have to match the case when you call it. Does that make sense? So the changes that I made, it's the same except I added grant type name instead of grant type key. And then the other change I did is I added another inner join.
Somebody over there.
Oh, sorry.
You need a drink or?
I did, I just got it.
So I'm going to highlight that whole thing and I'll just show you what it. This is the last we're going to do with inner joins. These are, as I said, the hardest thing I'm going to show you. So now the result of this is it shows the name of the person, right? The grant request, and it also shows what they're requesting, the grant type name. So instead of numbers here, I have what they're actually asking for. Yeah.
So there's just two joins.
It's, yeah, part of what I want to show you is you can actually join as many tables as you need to as long as there's a relationship between them. You can go on to 5 or 10 joins or 20 joins if you have to. Yeah, and it's just a way of bringing the data back together that you split up, right? So that you can bring it back in a humanly readable form. I'm going to show you just a couple more things after this, and then Wednesday is open lab, right? So,
Should we probably wait till Wednesday to take the quiz, or just take it if we're
whenever you
ready?
want.
Okay.
What does it do?
Or yeah, when does it due?
I don't know. I don't grade by when they're due.
Sometime between now and the end of this quarter.
Yes.
I like that due date.
I'm for that.
I
Quiz.
mean, you said it was due before Thanksgiving. Is that what I heard?
So I don't think it's going to be that challenging, and you can, you get 2 or 3 tries, and there's only 4 options under each, and one of the options is none of the above. So I think, it shouldn't be that stressful, I hope. It's just to reinforce a few concepts at the end of each thing. All right, so I'm going to go on to the next thing. Are you guys any other questions on this? This is hard. I don't expect it to sink in and be perfectly molded in your brain. It's just showing you something, and then when we play with it, I expect it to take a little bit of.
So let me ask a question.
Sure.
Let's say you did this thing. what if, on the other end of it, say, I want this and I want this and I want this. This is what's fits.
Yeah.
What would you add? Well, what is the question to the answer we just did?
So say you wanted to see, you wanted to, and you might do a where clause on the end of this too, because you might only want to see some of them.
So, I mean, somebody gives you a question and say, here, go make this happen.
Yeah, so basically they'd say, I want to see the grant request. The thing is that they don't probably want to, they want to see the people involved, right? So you might want to see just, typically a manager isn't going to want to search to find out, you know, who number 4 is.
Yeah.
And they probably won't have memorized all the grant types. So it would they would prefer a report to show the names rather than the word. I mean, for this thing, there are questions. I mean, you could ask. I'm not showing you how to do all the aggregate functions and stuff, but it's pretty easy to bring back what were the total grants for this type of thing for this year, you know, things like that. You can do, SQL is actually really powerful, particularly for developing reports. And it's also really useful for extracting data for data analytics and data, you know. I'm only showing you just the gist of it. Typically, you would want to do this just because, again, most people don't want to have to look at the numbers. They want to see the data. The numbers are for the computer. You know, the way you join it, split it up and join it. That's for the processing. But people tend to process things by way of names and words. All right. Other questions? That's a good question. I mean, I'm not showing you this in its full glory, I guess. But typically, if they said, I want to see a list of all the grants, and then as I said, you might say, where for 2018 or for this month. And we could do that. Actually, 2018 won't work because I think it's 2015, 2016 on here. But okay, I'm going to show inserts, updates, and deletes, and these don't take so long. Couple of things about these. Oh, notice again, comments are double dash. These change the data in the table, right? Nothing that we've done up above changes anything about the tables, right? It's just returning the data to look at it in different ways. When you start doing inserts, updates, and deletes, you are changing things in the table. So they're inherently dangerous. Inserts are probably the least dangerous, although garbage in can tend to make a database less useful. Updates, I think, are actually the most dangerous. Deletes are fairly dangerous too, but updates, I think, are actually the most dangerous thing you can do on a database. And in general, for security, I would not give a user permission to do update or delete. I would couch that in a stored procedure, which we're not going to do, but a stored procedure is a program of SQL where basically they would just pass the parameters and you would control the update and all of that and make sure that it happens in a nice orderly manner, you know. And so I would give them permission to run this stored procedure, but I would not directly give them permission to update. So let's do an insert real quickly. I'm going to insert a person that does a donation. And one of the things I wanted to show you about that is if you do that, there's 3 tables involved. There's person. Wait till let me comment that. There's the person table where you have to enter them if it's a new person. There's the person address, assuming that you're doing that. And then there's the donation table. So typically, this is real typical. You have to do one act, like make a donation. You have to insert into multiple tables. When you build a front end to this, the form would just be a single form, right? You just enter all your person information, your address information, and your donation information, and then underneath the code would take the SQL and spread it out into the tables where it goes. So from a web front end thing, you don't have to worry about the fact that it's multiple tables. From the back end where you're writing the code, you have to insert into all 3 places. So I'm going to show the basic insert.
Is that what we doing? We now have to try to insert in three places.
Yes.
Okay.
So I'm going to insert into person. I'm going to show you a cheat. I'm going to go to person. I'm going to open that up. I'm going to grab the columns folder, and I'm going to drop.
Oh, wait.
Well, here, I'll undo that. I'll delete.
I didn't see any of that.
So I opened up the person table. I grabbed columns. I just drug it. Now, having done that, we don't really want all of these. I am not going to enter their password, and I'm not going to enter their password seed. We don't want to enter their person key because it's an auto number. All right, so I'm only going to enter into those 4 fields. I'm not going to give them a password right now. That involves a function that hashes it, and I don't want to go there. So, and then I'm going to do values, and I'm going to give these some values. Do you guys have a good last name to enter?
Smith.
Smith. Okay, so you're going to have 3 Smiths.
Of course. You want to search on Smith?
And then I don't know. This makes 3 J's. There was Jerry. There was Jay. I think.
Fred.
We could do Fred. Fred Smith.
And the names you have down there, Anderson.
Well, it does. This is a brand new person.
Oh, and then
And then an email is just going to be fsmith. Sounds slightly obscene. It's fsmith at. Yeah, Gmail is what I.
FedEx, because he's the CEO of FedEx.
Is it?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Huh.
I work for FedEx, so.
Oh, okay. Well, we could do.
Weird knowledge.
Is FedEx a email?
Yeah.
Whoops.
Doesn't matter. And then the entry date, I'm just going to do get date, which is a built-in function that returns the current date and time. All right. So I am just going to run this. And it says 1 row affected. And if I do select star from person,
Does that function need to be case sensitive?
no.
No, this is like, wow. That's the laziest language.
Seriously.
So I'm going to go to the very bottom of the list here. All right, so here's Fred Smith, person 130. Null because we didn't hash the password, and that's null too. So 130.
So let's say, for an example, you add this guy in, but he doesn't have a password. How do you do that? Because you just showed us they were null.
Right, because I didn't do them.
Yeah, correct. But is that something where you have to ask the user to do their password, et cetera, et cetera?
Well, so you can make those required. I didn't.
Oh,
The other thing, so this is really not where we need to go right now, but I'll go down into programmability. I have functions.
so it would say here, enter your password, et cetera, and then basically it's another insert on those 2 values.
Well, you could put this in here. Like I have a hash password. I built a hash password function, which we could have used. It would complicate things right now.
Okay.
But there is a function to hash passwords. And I could have put it in the insert statement, but it would take a lot of explanation. So. But yeah, you can make them enter their password, and then you could hash it. So this person is 130. So I'm going to do person address. So I'm going to say insert into, and there are more effective ways, more efficient ways than just looking up their key. But again, I'm trying to keep it fairly simple. So I'm going to do person address. I'm going to go to person address and drag in the columns and drop it, and then I'll break these up to be on page better. So this is person address.
You said you dragged the column?
Yeah, you drag the columns folder, the whole columns folder. Person address key needs to go away because it's an auto number. All the others can stay. and then values. And the values, I'm going to do null for apartment because it's easiest. The street, I'll do 1001 or whatever that is. Nowhere Avenue. City, let's just do Seattle. State. State is, I don't know if it's 2 characters or not. I think it is. Zip.
You need a comma between Seattle and Washington or no?
Yes, you do. Good eye. And the person key is 130. Oops, not 120, 130. And I just looked that up. There are ways to extract the key, particularly if it's an auto number. There are ways to extract it. You can, there are functions to go for it, but I was just trying to keep it simple. So I just looked it up. So this would insert into person address.
I got a question.
Yeah.
So when you've done this and you highlight certain things, if you re-highlight the first line, insert person, Smith, Fred, et cetera, does it redo it?
Yes, it would for an insert.
Okay, so when we're doing this, don't highlight that twice.
Yeah.
Okay.
So for an insert, one of the drawbacks of auto numbers, which these have, is that every row is unique because they all have a unique number. So you could insert the same person 100 times and it wouldn't complain. There are things you can do about it. One of the things I think I have in here, but maybe not, is you can make the email unique, and then it would complain if you repeat the same.
So did you set the person key here manually?
I did.
Yeah, well, he looked it up at the
I looked it up at the bottom of the.
Oh, gotcha.
So I did this select from person, and when I did that, at the very bottom, so go all the way to the bottom, there was Fred Smith at 130. There are, as I said, there are better ways to do this, but this is the simplest way, and I just don't want to complicate it right now. All right, so I inserted that, right?
Did you even need to put the person key?
Yes. If you don't have the person key, then it won't. The address won't be attached to the person.
Is your zip code not 4 letters instead of 5?
It should be 5. Did I run it already?
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. It's just a character string, but yeah, it's not a valid zip code, and there's nothing in here that will test for that.
Oh.
So I'm going to do select star from person address to see if it got there, and then we'll do the donation. Then we'll be done with inserts. The idea here was just that you often have to do multiple inserts. So here's 130 is the key, and there's Nowhere Avenue, and etc. All right, so let's do quick at the bottom of person address. So I did select star from person address, and then I went clear to the bottom. Be the last row. Yeah, 135 is not the person key. It's the person address key.
Oh, okay.
The person key is over at the end.
Now I get it.
All right, so then we do insert into donation. And this one I don't really have to. I'm just going to do donation amount and person key. Oh, and donation date. I need donation date. These don't have to be in the same order they are in the database. One thing to know about the values, though, they do not know what the fields are. It just first is matched to first. Like, so if I go here, null is matched to apartment, 1001 Nowhere's Ave is matched to street. It's just first to first, second to second, third to third. They're just matched by sequence. There's no awareness.
Will it complain if there's a data type mismatch?
It'll complain if there's a data type mismatch.
So will, will the user see that, or the coder would have to see that?
It would show it down here. when you try to run it, it would throw an error.
Okay, but our job is to catch those, so that way the user never sees it.
Yes, yeah. Ideally, you could. One of the things that developers hate about SQL is that usually, like the C# code or the PHP code, won't throw the error. The database has to throw the error back to the coder. So it can be a problem sometimes. All right, so for the values, I'm going to do get date. Again, that returns the current date and time. I'm going to do donation. What do you want them to donate?
$1,000.
All right. And you don't have to do the decimals, but you can. And person key 130. All right, same person key. It's what ties them to the donation. And whoa. Oh, I have the select as well as the. Did it go in there too?
Oh, that's insane. No.
I don't know if I ran it. Let me see. I did the select. Let's go down. Oh, let's look at messages. It also did the one row affected.
It did what?
It wrote the one row.
So then where is the
So the row would be in
131 now?
select. No, select star from donation. And if we go to the very bottom again, all right, there's the person key 130, the donation of 1,000, and the donation confirmation I built into the table as a default value, so it generates this by default.
So what are we supposed to do since you did that incorrectly? You selected an extra line, right?
What I did is I selected the select above. It should be okay.
Oh, just you want the insert one below.
Yeah, I just wanted one below, but it actually said that that was okay, that it did it. All right. Messages gives you the text messages. The results is, like that. I'm going to do 2 more things, and we'll call it a day. And Wednesday wide open, as I said, because I've taken up all your time. It's okay. It's because you guys have questions, and that's good. Are you guys ready? Or do you need a minute?
Fire away.
All right, so I'm going to show you the most dangerous thing there is.
All right.
And I'm going to do it. If you want to do this, do what I do very carefully. I am going to do an update wrong first, just to show you how dangerous it is. So I am going to do something. I'm going to say begin tran. Anybody have an idea what that is? And I'm going to run it. Begin a transaction. Now, you generally don't want to do this in a production database, straight into a query like this, because I've just frozen the database. It will not allow anyone in until I finish this transaction. So if I went away to lunch after doing this, people would be really PO'd. With us, it doesn't matter because nobody else is using the database, but these are typically done only inside of stored procedures or things that execute in a millisecond. But you could do this there's no way to do an undo. There's no such thing as an undo unless you manually set up these transactions. So I'm going to do something really dumb. This is something that could get you fired. I am going to update person. And I am going to set person last name equal Smith. If I run that as is, what will happen?
It'll set everybody's name.
That's right. So I'm going to do that. I can do that because I did the begin trend. If you didn't run begin trend, don't do that. Although you can always download the database again. All right. Notice it says 130 rows affected.
Oh, Jesus.
And if I do select star from person, everybody is named Smith. I consider this my last episode of The Matrix. Remember that? Now, if I hadn't done begin tran, imagine you'd done this. You came in at 11:30 at night to do some work on the database for a company, and you'd been drinking or something. And you did this by accident, which is really easy to do.
Yeah.
You're basically screwed.
You're fired.
Really?
Yeah. Now,
There's
there
no
are
undo.
ways to bring it back. There's no, with this I can undo, but if you hadn't done this,
What do you
say,
mean? What do you mean you hadn't done?
if I hadn't done the begin trend, there's 0 ways to undo this, really.
So wait, you did begin?
I did begin transaction, and I'm
So
still
now,
in,
now you're fired.
I'm still in suspense right now. I mean, because I did begin transaction, it's still in suspense. It actually hasn't committed these changes to the database yet.
But it says spin.
It does, but if I roll it back, it'll go back.
So then I guess I don't understand what's the transaction.
It's right now, it's suspended. The transaction is in process, but it hasn't been written to the database.
Oh.
This is actually a temporary state.
Oh.
But if I hadn't done begin tran, it would be a permanent state.
Oh, so technically you have one get out of jail free card.
If you do begin tran, but if you had not done begin tran, it would just be there.
That's your safety.
Yes, but I wouldn't typically in production environment, as I said, you can't get away with doing this.
Okay.
You can here, but the only way to undo this, if I had not done begin tran, is to restore from backup. Right? If you backed up the database, you could restore from backup, and then you could restore from the log up till the deadly moment. Right? So you can restore up to time. The bad thing about that is you have to be offline to do the restore. So you have to take the database offline to do that. And if you haven't done backups, then you are 100% screwed.
I'm definitely fired.
Yeah. So because I did begin tran, I can do roll back tran, and that is an undo. That's a get out of jail. And now if I do select star from person, they're back. The way you want to do this, let's not change it to Smith, but let's change J. Anderson to Jason Anderson. Okay. Since it's at the top of the list, it's easy to see. So I'm going to change person first name to Jason instead of J. And let's do, I'm going to do a comma so you can see how to change more than one thing at a time. And I'm going to say person email equal jason.anderson@gmail.com. So say we just entered it wrong the first time. Okay, so what you want to do now is you want to say where. Ideally, like person key equals 1. Right, so that you're doing it where you're very specific about what you're changing. So the where clause is really crucial there. Now, sometimes you want to change whole groups of things at once. Like you might want to change all of your prices at 20%, all your prices or something. Or you might want to change a subgroup all at once. So it isn't always the case that an update only affects one row. But in general, when you're doing an edit, it's better. The more limited this is, the better, right? So when I run this one, I haven't done the begin tran, but it should be fine. We've got one row affected. And if I do a select star from person here, it's Jason and Jason Anderson is changed dot record. Updates are for changing existing records. If I did do, I'm going to just run this again to show you. If I did the begin tran, again, I'm in suspense. Everything's locked. If I run this, this is fine. It's not going to change anything because it's just changing it to what it already is. If I wanted to commit that, there's another command which is commit tran. Commit tran is the opposite of rollback. Commit writes it to the database. It means you've done it right. You want to do it. And so I do commit. And again, it didn't change anything from the last time because I just did the same thing. But commit writes it, and rollback does it. But you can't roll back after committing. One or the other, and you either roll it back or you commit. Transaction's over at that point. Does that make sense? Updates are really essential. You always have to change things, but they're really dangerous. It's really easy to forget to do a where clause, or you could do a where clause that's a little broader than you want it to be, right? You might accidentally change more records than you think. So right now, if we were to change where person last name equals Smith, we'd be changing 3 records, but we may only wanted to change 1, right? So the key field is usually your best bet. Last thing. This also can use a tran and possibly roll back. I'm going to do delete from person. I'm actually going to give it a where person key equals 130. The person we just made, person key equals 130. This won't work. Anybody know why? It's a foreign key violation.
How would I know that?
What?
How would I know that?
Basically, you can't delete any record that has child records, right? So when we made this 130,
Well, how would I know
Smith.
that just from looking at it if I didn't know the database and kind of follow through it?
Well, typically when you're doing this, you do know the database.
Oh, okay.
But if you didn't, it gives you this. It conflicted with the FK donation, and it also basically this person made a donation, so their person key is in that table. They also have an address, so their person key is a foreign key there. So they're child tables. It won't allow you to delete a parent that has children because it would create orphans. It would create a donation that nobody donated. It would create an address that doesn't belong to anybody.
Delete it first.
You have to delete, yeah, this sounds really cruel, but you have to
Kill the kids
delete the
and then-
children before you can delete the parent.
Take it out.
So I'd have to delete the donation and then delete the address, and then I could delete Fred Smith. And you can do but you have to be careful. I'm going to do that's with the primary key. Foreign keys you can delete at will. So I am going to do begin tran. And here's the dangerous thing with begin tran. A lot of people type it, but unless you run it, it doesn't matter, right? Typing it isn't sufficient. If you don't run it, then when you try to roll back, it'll say there's no transaction in process. So I ran it, and I'm going to delete from donation. And notice you never select columns to delete. You're always deleting whole rows from a table. So I'm just going to say delete from donation, and I'm not giving it any criteria. 49 rows affected. And if I do select star from donation, you'll see that there's nothing in there. Because foreign keys are fair game for deletion. There's no child tables to donation. So
But we ran our get out of jail free card.
we did. So I can say
So we're
roll
not
back.
fired yet.
We're not fired yet. This is also why it's generally good advice to not log in as administrator, even if you are the administrator. You should only log in as an administrator if you have to do things that require administrative permissions. In general, you want to log in on a lesser thing so you don't accidentally do damage. Speaking of, I just remembered a flashback to something I did that was really stupid. That just, you can always do stupid things. This was for Windows, it wasn't for SQL. Some years ago, I wanted to get rid of some spare files. So I opened up a DOS window and I said delete star.star. I thought, but I didn't check the directory. So I wiped out my Windows.
Oh,
And that was on my school computer, and I was not going to admit that I had done that. So it took me, I set up DOS, and I went in and I found the network files where the Windows installs were, and I reinstalled Windows and redid all that. It took me weeks. But I didn't ever admit that I had done that. Making a mistake is fairly easy. And one of the things about SQL in here is that it never says, "Are you sure?" And generally, there's no undo unless you're really careful. That's all I have. It's 3 o'clock. I'm going to post this, and I'll post the video. And then Wednesday is open lab to work on this stuff. So let me kill the Zoom. I need to. So I'm going to stop the video.